My name is Maya, and I am 34 years old. Standing at the gate of my oceanfront home in Malibu, I felt a strange mixture of emotions wash over me as I stared at the two people I never thought I would see again. My brother Lucas and his wife Jessica stood with their luggage at their feet, desperation in their eyes as they begged to move in with me. 10 years ago, Lucas punched me in the face and cut me off completely because Jessica called me trash, and I dared to confront them about it. Before I tell you what decision I made that day, let me share how we got here. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Denver with my parents and older brother Lucas. Our house was modest but comfortable, a ranch-style home with a finished basement where Lucas and I would spend hours playing video games when we were young. He was 4 years older than me, and in those early years, he was my protector and best friend. I remember him teaching me how to skateboard, holding my hand as we rolled down the gentle slope of our driveway until I found my balance. When kids at school would tease me about my thick glasses, Lucas would step in and tell them to back off. Our parents both worked in education, my father as a high school principal and my mother as a district coordinator. They worked long hours, which meant Lucas and I spent a lot of time together after school. We would walk home together, Lucas always making sure I looked both ways before crossing streets, and then we would do our homework at the dining room table before making grilled cheese sandwiches and watching cartoons on Nickelodeon. Everything changed when Lucas turned 12. Our parents suddenly began placing enormous expectations on him. Enrolled him in honors classes, signed him up for debate team, student government, and varsity sports, constantly talking about how he would get into an Ivy League school and become a lawyer or doctor. It was as if, overnight, the focus of our entire family shifted to Lucas and his future. I was only 8 at the time, and I noticed the change immediately. Family dinners became interrogation sessions about Lucas's grades and achievements. My accomplishments, like winning the school science fair or getting the lead in the 5th grade musical, were mentioned briefly before the conversation returned to Lucas. I still remember the sting of disappointment when no one came to see me perform in Annie because it conflicted with one of Lucas's debate tournaments. As the years passed, I worked harder and harder to gain my parents' approval. I maintained a perfect GPA, joined student council, and volunteered at the local animal shelter. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to measure up to Lucas's achievements in my parents' eyes. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would nod and say, "That's good, Maya," before turning to Lucas and gushing over his B+ in AP chemistry. The change in Lucas was gradual but unmistakable. The kind, protective brother I had known began to morph into someone who absorbed our parents' attitudes. He became condescending, often making snide remarks about my interests or accomplishments. "Theater is just playing pretend, Maya. It's not like what I'm doing, stuff that'll actually matter in the real world," he would say when I excitedly told him about landing a role in the school production. By the time I was in middle school and Lucas was in high school, the divide between us had grown wide. He rarely had time for me anymore, too busy with his SAT prep courses and leadership activities. When he did acknowledge me, it was often to criticize or embarrass me in front of his friends. I remember one particularly painful incident when I was 13 and had invited my first crush over to study. Lucas waltzed into the living room and started telling embarrassing stories about me wetting the bed until I was 7, laughing as my face turned red with humiliation. Despite all this, I still clung to the belief that somewhere deep down, Lucas still cared about me. I would notice glimpses of my old brother occasionally, like when he quietly helped me with my algebra homework without our parents knowing, or when he defended me to a particularly mean teacher who had unfairly accused me of plagiarizing an essay. I tried to maintain our connection, leaving encouraging sticky notes in his backpack before big tests, or saving him the last piece of Mom's chocolate chip cookies because I knew they were his favorite. Sometimes these gestures would be met with a rare smile or a quick hair ruffle, moments I treasured because they reminded me of how things used to be. When Lucas left for Stanford at 18, our house felt both emptier and somehow less tense. Without him there to compare me to constantly, my parents occasionally noticed my achievements. My mother actually attended my debate tournament when I made it to regionals, and my father helped me research colleges for my applications. But their conversations still revolved around Lucas, his classes at Stanford, his internship prospects, the important professors he was impressing. I threw myself into my studies and extracurricular activities with renewed determination. If I couldn't have my parents' unconditional love and approval, I would at least make something of myself on my own terms. By my senior year, I had risen to valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, and been accepted into their prestigious computer science program. The day I received my scholarship letter, I ran home, bursting with excitement. I had achieved something significant entirely on my own merit, something that would relieve my parents of any financial burden for my education. I found my parents in the kitchen and eagerly shared my news. "That's wonderful, Maya," my father said, looking up briefly from grading papers. "Berkeley has a good program," my mother added, not looking up from her laptop. "Not quite Stanford, of course, but very respectable." Their lukewarm response stung, but I had expected it. What I hadn't expected was the phone call that came 15 minutes later. It was Lucas, and my parents immediately put him on speaker. He had just been accepted to Stanford Law School with a partial scholarship. My parents erupted in cheers and congratulations. My full-ride scholarship completely forgotten in the excitement over Lucas's achievement. I sat there at the kitchen table, my acceptance letter still in my hand, feeling invisible in my own home. That was the moment I realized that no matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough to put me on equal footing with Lucas and my family. I had always been interested in technology, but seeing these innovators, many not much older than myself, made me realize I didn't have to wait until after graduation to pursue my own ventures. I declared a double major in computer science and business, which raised eyebrows from my academic advisor. "That's an ambitious combination," she warned. "The workload will be intense." But I was determined. Years of trying to prove myself to my family had made me resilient and disciplined when it came to academic challenges. College life was busy but exhilarating. I joined the Women in Tech Club and the Entrepreneurship Society, where I met like-minded students who shared my passion for innovation. During my sophomore year, I began developing an idea for a mobile application that would help small businesses streamline their supply chain management and connect with local vendors more efficiently. I spent countless nights in the campus computer lab, teaching myself additional programming languages and working on prototypes. My relationship with my family grew increasingly distant during this time. I would call home every Sunday, but the conversations were brief and superficial. My parents were preoccupied with Lucas's progress at law school and his summer associate position at a prestigious San Francisco firm. When I mentioned my app idea during one call, my father chuckled and said, "Apps are a dime a dozen these days, Maya. Focus on getting good internships like your brother." Financial independence became my priority. The scholarship covered tuition, but living expenses in the Bay Area were steep. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus tech support center and took on freelance coding projects for local businesses. Every dollar I earned went toward building my business or paying for essentials. I lived frugally, often skipping social events to save money or work on my app. During my junior year, I met Professor David Chen during a business plan competition. A former Google executive who had founded 2 successful startups before turning to academia, Professor Chen saw potential in my idea and offered to mentor me. Under his guidance, I refined my business plan and learned about securing funding. "You've got something special here, Maya," Professor Chen told me after reviewing my latest prototype. "But you need to think bigger. Could revolutionize how small businesses operate nationwide." With Professor Chen's encouragement, I applied to Berkeley's Startup Incubator program and was accepted. This gave me access to workspace, resources, and introductions to potential investors. I assembled a small team of fellow students who believed in my vision. Emma, a brilliant programmer, Marcus, a business major with innovative marketing ideas, and Sophia, who understood logistics and operations. The summer before my senior year, we launched a beta version of the app called Chainlink with 30 local businesses in Oakland. The feedback was promising, but we quickly discovered flaws in our model. Several businesses dropped out, citing issues with the user interface and integration problems with their existing systems. It was my first real taste of failure, and it hit hard. I remember calling Professor Chen in tears from my cramped studio apartment, ready to give up. This is part of the process, he assured me. Every successful entrepreneur faces setbacks. What matters is how you respond to them. Taking his advice to heart, I gathered my team for an honest assessment of what went wrong. We spent the next 2 months completely rebuilding the platform, addressing each issue raised by our beta testers. I used every cent of my savings to keep us afloat during this period, often surviving on ramen noodles and energy bars to stretch my budget further. When I went home for Christmas that year, the contrast between Lucas's life and mine couldn't have been more stark. He had just graduated law school and accepted a position at a white shoe firm in Los Angeles, already talking about buying a condo in Beverly Hills. Meanwhile, I was wearing thrift store clothes and had lost weight from my irregular eating habits. "You look tired, Maya," my mother commented during Christmas dinner. "Perhaps you should reconsider this app business. There's an entry-level position at the district office that might suit you after graduation." "I'm fine, Mom," I replied, trying to hide my frustration. "Chainlink is going through some growing pains, but we're making real progress." Lucas smirked from across the table. "Chainlink sounds like a prison reference. Are you helping businesses or planning a jailbreak?" Our parents laughed, and I felt that familiar sting of being the family joke. But something had changed in me. Instead of shrinking from their dismissal, I found myself calmly describing our new business model and the potential market we were targeting. They might not understand or approve, but I no longer needed them to. After graduation, while most of my classmates were interviewing for corporate positions at Apple, Google, and Facebook, I decided to go all in on Chainlink. We relaunched with our improved platform and began to see steady growth. Professor Chen introduced me to several angel investors who provided enough funding to move into a small office space in Soma and hire 3 additional developers. The first year was grueling. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. There were moments when I questioned my decision, especially when I would see social media updates from Lucas, traveling to London and Tokyo for business meetings, posting photos from expensive restaurants, buying a Tesla, all while still receiving financial support from our parents for his transition period into big law. But slowly, Chainlink began to gain traction. Small businesses in the Bay Area started recommending us to their counterparts in other cities. By the 18-month mark, we had over 500 businesses using our platform and had expanded to 6 states. We weren't profitable yet, but we were growing steadily. I still made obligatory appearances at family gatherings, though these became increasingly uncomfortable. My parents would introduce me to their friends as our daughter, who has a little internet business, while Lucas was presented as our son, the corporate attorney at Morrison & Associates. I learned to smile through these interactions, knowing that external validation from my family was something I might never receive. What I didn't realize was that while one chapter of family disappointment was closing, another, more painful one was about to begin. One that would test not just my business resolve, but my personal boundaries in ways I could never have anticipated. I first met Jessica during Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house when I was 26. Lucas had mentioned he was bringing someone special, and my parents were practically vibrating with excitement. They had deep cleaned the entire house, bought new dishes for the occasion, and my mother had even hired a professional photographer to capture this momentous occasion. When they arrived, I immediately understood the fuss. Jessica was stunning, with perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, and the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of privilege. She wore designer clothes that even I could recognize despite my limited interest in fashion. A Burberry trench coat and what looked like Louboutin heels. Lucas looked at her like she was a Hollywood starlet, and my parents were equally entranced. "Maya, this is Jessica Wellington," Lucas said, emphasizing her last name as if I should recognize it. I later learned that she was the daughter of Robert Wellington, senior partner at one of Los Angeles' most prestigious law firms and former UCLA Law School dean. "It's so lovely to meet you," Jessica said, offering a perfectly manicured hand. "Squeezed has told me so much about his little sister and her cute little tech startup." There was something about the way she said cute little tech startup that made my skin crawl, but I smiled politely. "Chainlink is actually doing quite well. We just secured Series A funding and expanded to 12 states." How charming, she replied, already turning her attention to my mother's redecorated dining room. Throughout dinner, Jessica dominated the conversation with stories about her recent trip to the Maldives, her father's new beach house in Manhattan Beach, and the charity auction she had helped organize that raised $2.53 million for childhood cancer research. My parents hung on her every word, asking follow-up questions and complimenting everything from her philanthropic work to her choice of wine. When I attempted to share news about a major partnership we had just signed with a national restaurant chain, my father cut me off mid-sentence to ask Jessica about her law school plans. It was as if I had become even more invisible in my family's eyes now that Lucas had brought home someone who represented everything they valued: wealth, social status, and connections to power. After dinner, I helped clear dishes while Lucas, Jessica, and my parents moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. As I loaded the dishwasher, I overheard Jessica say, "The tech sector is so volatile these days. I worry about people who put all their money into that bubble, especially when they don't have the proper connections or safety net." There was a pause. Then she added more quietly, "Some people just aren't built for high-stakes entrepreneurship." I felt my cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment, knowing they were talking about me. But I took a deep breath and reminded myself that my worth wasn't determined by Jessica's opinions or my family's approval. Over the next few months, Lucas and Jessica became increasingly serious. Los Angeles Magazine's 30 Under 30 legal power couple spread, and my parents couldn't stop talking about what a perfect match they were. During one phone call, my mother, not so subtly, suggested that I might want to let Lucas introduce you to some of his colleagues, since you're not getting any younger. "I'm focused on growing my company right now, Mom," I replied. "Dating isn't a priority." "Well, not everyone can marry someone like Jessica," she sighed. "But you could at least try to meet someone suitable in your breezes." Despite these tensions, I made an effort to maintain a relationship with Lucas. We would occasionally meet for lunch when I was in LA for business meetings, though these increasingly included Jessica. She would be pleasant to my face, asking surface-level questions about my business before steering the conversation back to her world of law school networking events and charity galas. 6 months after they started dating, Lucas proposed to Jessica with a 3-carat Tiffany diamond ring during a hot air balloon ride over Napa Valley. The engagement was announced in the Los Angeles Times Society pages, and my parents immediately began planning what promised to be the wedding of the season. I was invited to the engagement party at the Wellington Estate, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion in Bel Air with manicured gardens and a view of the city lights. Feeling out of place among the wealthy guests, I found a quiet corner in the library to catch my breath. That's when I overheard Lucas and Jessica talking in the adjacent room. "Your sister seems nice enough," Jessica was saying, her voice dripping with insincerity. "But honestly, Lucas, she's a bit of an embarrassment. Everyone here tonight is someone important: judges, politicians, partners at major firms, and she's running some little app business out of a co-working space." I froze, unable to move as I waited for Lucas to defend me. Instead, I heard him sigh. "I know, babe. She's always been the family disappointment. My parents tried their best with her, but she just doesn't have what it takes to succeed in the real world. She's basically trash compared to the people we associate with," Jessica continued. "I mean, look at her outfit tonight. It's like she shopped at Target. Let's just keep her involvement in the wedding to a minimum. Maybe we can seat her at the back with the distant relatives." "Agreed," Lucas replied. "We don't want anything dragging down the tone of our special day." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All these years, I had held on to the belief that deep down, Lucas still cared about me. That despite his condescension and our parents' favoritism, he was still the brother who had taught me to skateboard and defended me from bullies. In that moment, that last shred of illusion was shattered. I slipped out of the library and rejoined the party, my face a careful mask hiding the pain underneath. For the remainder of the evening, I smiled and made small talk, counting the minutes until I could leave. When Jessica clinked her glass to announce they had set a date for the following spring at the Montage Beverly Hills, I joined in the applause despite feeling hollow inside. On the flight back to San Francisco the next day, I made a decision. I would attend their wedding, because that's what was expected of me. But I would maintain stronger boundaries with my family going forward. Their approval was something I would never have, and continuing to seek it was only causing me pain. What I didn't know then was that the worst was yet to come, and that the wedding itself would become the breaking point that would ultimately sever my relationship with my family for good. 6 months after the engagement party, wedding preparations were in full swing. Despite being Lucas's only sister, I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. Jessica had selected 5 of her sorority sisters from UCLA and her 2 cousins instead. "It's nothing personal," Lucas explained over the phone. "Jessica has her vision for the wedding party, and we need to respect that." I told myself it didn't matter. I was busy with Chainlink anyway, which had recently secured Series B funding. We were now operating in 22 states with a team of 45 employees. The company was finally profitable, generating over $8 million in annual revenue. 3 months before the wedding, I received a strange call from my mother. "Maya, we need to discuss the wedding expenses," she said without preamble. "What about them?" Confused. I had already bought my dress and booked my flights. "Well, as you know, the Wellingtons are contributing significantly to the venue and catering, but there are still many costs that fall to us as the groom's family. Trapped into our retirement savings, but we're still coming up short." A sense of foreboding washed over me. "Mom, what are you saying?" "We need help, Maya. We used your credit card for some of the deposits. We know your business is doing well now, and this is an important family occasion." I nearly dropped my phone. "You did what? How did you even get my credit card information?" "You left your wallet at the house during your last visit," she said dismissively. "It's not a big deal. We're family, and this is your brother's wedding." A count into my chase felt sick to my stomach. There were charges totaling $127,000, all to various wedding vendors. The Montage Beverly Hills, Wolfgang Puck Catering, a high-end florist in Beverly Hills, custom wedding favors from Tiffany & Co., and numerous others. "Mom, this is insane. You can't just take my credit card without permission and charge over $100,000. "Don't be so dramatic, Maya," she replied coldly. "Lucas would do the same for you. This is what family does. Besides, it's not like you can't afford it now that your little app is making money." I was speechless with rage and disbelief. Not only had they stolen from me, but they were acting as if I was obligated to accept it. "I want you to refund every charge immediately," I said when I could finally speak. "This is not a request. It's theft, and it's illegal." "I can't believe how selfish you're being," my mother exclaimed. "After everything we've done for you, this is your brother's special day." "What exactly have you done for me?" I shot back. "I put myself through college on scholarship, built my business without any support from you, and now you steal from me and call me selfish?" The conversation devolved from there, with my mother eventually hanging up on me after calling me an ungrateful daughter. My father called back an hour later, his tone more reasonable, but his message the same. I needed to step up and cover these expenses as part of my family duty. I contacted Chase immediately to dispute the charges, but because my parents had physical access to my card and there was a family relationship, the process became complicated. I was advised to file a police report, something I wasn't yet ready to do against my own parents. The week before the wedding, both families gathered in Los Angeles for various pre-wedding events. Despite everything, I attended the rehearsal dinner at Spago in Beverly Hills. I had decided to confront my parents and Lucas in person after the wedding, hoping to resolve the credit card situation privately. The dinner was lavish. 7 courses with wine pairings that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Robert Wellington gave a toast praising Lucas as the son I never had and expressing his joy at uniting their families. My parents beamed with pride, and I sat silently, feeling like an outsider at my own family event. After dinner, guests mingled in the restaurant's private wine room. I was speaking with one of Lucas's law school friends when Jessica approached, clearly having had several glasses of Chateau Margaux. "Maya, darling," she said, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I wanted to thank you for your generous contribution to our special day. Lucas told me about your parents using your credit card. So sweet of you to help out." My face burned with humiliation as several people turned to look at us. "That's not exactly how it happened," I said quietly. Jessica's smile turned cold. "No? Because I heard you've been throwing a tantrum about it. Really, Maya, it's unbecoming to be so stingy about your only brother's wedding." Something in me snapped. All the years of dismissal, of being the family disappointment, of trying and failing to earn their approval, culminated in that moment. My parents stole my credit card and charged $127,000 without my permission, I said, clearly. That's not being stingy. That's having normal boundaries. Jessica's eyes widened in mock concern. "Oh dear, is the little tech business not doing as well as you pretend? Is money tight? We could have arranged a payment plan if we'd known." "My business is doing fine," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "This is about respect and basic decency, concepts you clearly don't understand. How dare you speak to my fiancé that way?" Lucas's voice came from behind me. He had approached without my noticing and had clearly heard the end of our conversation. I turned to face him. "Lucas, she's deliberately humiliating me in public, and you and our parents had no right to use my credit card without permission." "We thought you'd want to contribute," he said dismissively, "but apparently you're too selfish to help your own family." "This isn't about helping family," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "This is about you all feeling entitled to take whatever you want from me while giving nothing in return." "Nothing in return?" Lucas laughed bitterly. "We gave you everything, a stable home, opportunities, connections." "No, Lucas, you got those things. I got to watch from the sidelines while being told I was never good enough." Several guests were openly watching now, and Jessica seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. "I told you she was trash," she stage whispered to Lucas. "No class whatsoever, making a scene at our rehearsal dinner." That's when I made the mistake of revealing what I had overheard at the engagement party. "You both that night, you know. In the library at your parents' house. I heard you call me trash and a disappointment. I heard Lucas agree with you." Lucas's face contorted with anger. "You were spying on us?" "I was in the next room, and you weren't exactly whispering." What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. Lucas's face flushed deep red, and before I knew what was happening, his fist connected with my cheek, sending me stumbling backward into a wine display. The room fell silent. I touched my face in shock, feeling the sting where his knuckles had made contact. A small trickle of blood ran from the corner of my mouth. "Get out," Lucas said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out and don't come back. You're not welcome at my wedding or in my life anymore." No one moved to help me or condemn Lucas's action, not my parents, who stood frozen a few feet away, not any of the guests who had witnessed the assault. Jessica looked almost satisfied, slipping her arm through Lucas's as if to support him through this difficult moment. I gathered my purse and walked out of the restaurant, tears blurring my vision. Outside, I called an Uber and returned to my hotel, where I packed my belongings with shaking hands. I took the first flight back to San Francisco the next morning. The wedding went ahead as planned 2 days later. Without me. Chase eventually resolved most of the disputed charges, though the process took 8 months and temporarily damaged my credit score. I never received an apology from my parents or from Lucas. In fact, I didn't hear from any of them again for a very long time. That night changed everything. The physical assault was the final line crossed, but in truth, the relationship had been broken long before Lucas's fist made contact with my face. As I flew home that morning, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so full and rich that their absence would be nothing more than a footnote in my story. The first few months after the wedding incident were some of the darkest of my life. Han noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, my shorter temper, but I deflected their concerns with talk about expansion goals and market opportunities. Professor Chen was the only one I confided in. We met for coffee one rainy afternoon in Palo Alto, and I finally broke down, telling him everything that had happened with my family. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Maya," he said when I had finished, "what they did was abusive, financially, emotionally, and physically. Have you considered speaking with a therapist about this?" I hadn't, but his suggestion made, and sometimes it's the healthiest choice when the relationship is consistently harmful. Meanwhile, Chainlink was growing beyond my initial vision. What had started as a tool for small businesses to manage their supply chains had evolved into a comprehensive B2B platform that facilitated connections across entire industries. We secured a major investment from Sequoia Capital that allowed us to hire top-tier talent and expand internationally. I relocated our headquarters to a sleek office building in Soma and brought on a COO, Rachel Kim, who had experience scaling tech unicorns. One of those speaking opportunities led me to meet David Martinez, a technology journalist covering the future of supply chain management. David was thoughtful and asked insightful questions about the challenges I had overcome in building Chainlink. What was scheduled as a brief post-panel interview stretched to 3 hours and ended with David asking if I'd be interested in continuing our conversation over dinner. Our first date was at a small, farm-to-table restaurant in Hayes Valley. It's about who shows up for you, who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your successes without making them about themselves. When a property came on the market, a stunning modernist home perched on a cliff with Professor Chen visited several times a year, proud of how my parents had retired early, partially funded by investments Lucas had helped them make. They all still moved in the same social circles, attending charity galas and country club events, their lives seemingly unchanged except for my absence. I sometimes wondered if they ever thought about me, if they ever regretted their actions or missed my presence. But these wonderings became less frequent and less painful as time passed. I had created a family of choice. David, who loved me for exactly who I was. Professor Chen, who had believed in me when no one else did. Rachel and my team at Chainlink, who worked alongside me to build something meaningful. And the friends who showed up for birthdays and celebrations, who called to check in when I was traveling, who cared about my well-being without conditions. 8 years after leaving Los Angeles, David proposed during a sunset walk on the beach below our house. We married in a small ceremony on that same beach, surrounded by only our closest friends. Professor Chen walked me down the aisle, and Rachel was my maid of honor. There were no family complications, no drama, just a celebration of love and connection. The following year, we welcomed our daughter, Sophia, named after my therapist who had helped me heal. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I made a silent promise that she would always know her worth wasn't tied to achievement or comparison, conditionally, exactly as she was. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Chainlink continued to thrive, though I had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on strategic direction and spend more time with my family. Shimmer had published a best-selling book about the future of work and was developing a documentary series for Netflix. Our home by the ocean was filled with laughter, love, and the kind of peace I had never known growing up. And then, 10 years after I'd last seen any member of my family, my security system alerted me to visitors at the gate. On the monitor, I saw 2 people I never expected to see again. Lucas and Jessica, looking very different from the last time I had seen them. It was a crisp Saturday morning in November. David had taken 4-year-old Sophia to her swimming lesson, and I was enjoying a rare, quiet moment on the deck with a cup of coffee and the latest quarterly reports from Chainlink. The view of the Pacific Ocean stretched before me, waves crashing against the rocks below. This peaceful scene was interrupted by the chime of the security system. I checked the monitor and felt my heart skip a beat. Standing at my gate, looking directly into the camera, were Lucas and Jessica. I almost didn't recognize them at first. Gone was Jessica's perfectly styled hair and designer clothing. Instead, she wore jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Lucas, once impeccably groomed in expensive suits, was in wrinkled chinos and a faded polo shirt. They both looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and strained expressions. Behind them on the street was a beat-up Honda Civic with luggage piled in the back seat, a far cry from the luxury cars they once drove. For a moment, I considered ignoring them. I could pretend I wasn't home, wait for them to leave, and continue my life as if this interruption had never occurred. But curiosity mingled with a strange sense of inevitability. Perhaps this confrontation had been 10 years in the making. I walked to the front gate, my bare feet silent on the stone pathway. As I approached, I saw their expressions shift from anxiety to relief at the sight of me. "Maya," Lucas said as I stopped a few feet from the gate, keeping the barrier between us, "you look incredible." "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected.
"How did you even find me?"
Jessica stepped forward. "Your company was featured in Vanity Fair last month. They mentioned you lived in Malibu." We asked around until we found your address." "That doesn't explain why you're here," I said. "It's been 10 years since you hit me and told me to get out of your life." To look ashamed, I know, and I have no right to be here. But we didn't know where else to go. "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Everything fell apart," he said, running a hand through his hair, which I now noticed was streaked with gray, despite him being only 44. The firm I was working for was involved in some major fraud cases. When it all came to light, I lost my job, and my law license is under review. Then the recession hit, and we lost most of our savings," Jessica added, her once haughty voice now subdued. "We had to sell the house in Manhattan Beach, then the condo after that. We've been staying with friends, but we've worn out our welcome everywhere."
"What about Mom and Dad?" I asked. Lucas looked down at the ground.
"They lost almost everything too. They had invested their retirement savings based on my advice, funds that were tied to the firm's fraudulent activities. They're living in a small apartment in Riverside now, barely getting by on Social Security."
A heavy silence fell between us. I studied their faces, searching for any sign of the entitled, cruel people who had dismissed me for so many years. What I saw instead were two broken individuals, humbled by circumstances they had never prepared for. "Maya, we need a place to stay," Lucas finally said. "Just temporarily, until we can get back on our feet. I have some job prospects, nothing like before, but enough to start over. And Jessica is looking for work, but without much experience outside of charity boards."
"You want to move in with me?" I stated flatly, the absurdity of the situation not lost on me. Jessica nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We wouldn't ask if we had any other option. We have literally nowhere else to go." "Your parents stole from me," I reminded them. "They used my credit card to pay for your wedding without my permission. And you," I looked directly at Lucas. "You punched me in the face when I dared to stand up for myself. You called me trash." I turned to Jessica. "Both of you did. And now you want my help?" "I know we don't deserve it," Lucas said quietly. "But we're family, Maya. Despite everything, we're family." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You didn't consider me family when you were succeeding. Was the embarrassment, the disappointment, remember? I was trash compared to the people you associated with." They both flinched at my words, recognizing them as their own from years ago. "I was wrong," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We both were. The way we treated you was inexcusable." "Yes, it was," I agreed. and an apology 10 years later, only when you need something from me, doesn't exactly feel genuine. Lucas stepped closer to the gate. I understand your anger, I do. But please, Maya, we're desperate. We can help around the house, take care of maintenance, whatever you need. We'll stay out of your way. It would just be until we can save enough for a security deposit on an apartment. I looked at them, really looked at them, taking in the desperation in their eyes, the slump of their shoulders, the luggage in their car that contained all they had left in the world. And I thought about my life now, the success I had built, the family I had created, the peace I had found. For a brief moment, I considered what it would be like to have them living in my home. The tension at breakfast, the explanations to Sophia about who these people were, the inevitable comparisons and judgments that would creep back into my life. And beyond that, the message it would send, that people could treat me terribly without consequences as long as they apologized when it became convenient for them. I realized then that I was at a crossroads. The decision I made in this moment would define not just my relationship with Lucas and Jessica, but the example I set for my daughter about self-respect and boundaries. I need some time to think, I said finally. Wait here. I walked back toward the house, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. As I reached the deck, I saw David's car pulling into the driveway, returning from Sophia's swim lesson. I waited for them to join me, watching as my daughter ran up the path, her wet hair dripping onto her pink cover-up, her face bright with excitement. Mommy, I swam a whole lap today! Queh, she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around my legs. Coach said I'm ready for the advanced class. That's amazing, sweetheart, I said, smoothing her damp hair. I'm so proud of you. David approached more slowly, his expression questioning as he noticed my distracted state. Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. Lucas and Jessica are at the gate. They want to move in with us. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. Your brother? The one who hit you? I nodded and briefly explained their situation while Sophia played with her pool toys on the deck. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. What do you want to do? He asked when I had finished. It's your decision, and I'll support whatever you choose. But remember what Doctor always said about boundaries. I thought about those therapy sessions, about the hard work I had done to heal from my family's treatment. I thought about the life I had built, free from their judgment and conditional love.
Anne and I thought about what I would want Sophia to do if she were ever in a similar situation. With sudden clarity, I knew what my answer had to be. I walked back to the gate where Lucas and Jessica waited anxiously. Standing before Lucas and Jessica, I felt strangely calm. The ocean breeze ruffled my hair as I looked at these two people who had once held so much power over my emotional well-being. Now they stood before me, humbled by circumstance, seeking the very help they had once deemed beneath them to give. I thought about your request, I said, my voice steady and clear, and I've decided that you cannot move in with us. Their faces fell, disappointment and fear washing over them. Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. Please let me finish. I don't say this out of spite or revenge. I don't hate either of you anymore. That kind of anger is exhausting to carry, and I let it go years ago for my own peace. I took a deep breath before continuing. But I cannot welcome you into my home. The relationship we had was deeply unhealthy. You both, along with our parents, consistently undermined me, belittled my achievements, and ultimately stole from me and physically assaulted me when I stood up for myself. We know we were wrong, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. We've changed, Maya. Life has humbled us. Perhaps you have changed, I acknowledged, and I hope that's true. But an apology offered only when you need something from me doesn't demonstrate genuine remorse or growth. It shows desperation. Lucas's expression hardened. So that's it? You're going to turn your back on family when we need help? After all the advantages you've had? I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of his statement. Advantages? Lucas. I built everything I have without any help from our family. In fact, I succeeded despite the constant message that I wasn't good enough. And as for turning my back on family,
You did that to me 10 years ago with your fist." I saw shame flash across his face, quickly replaced by anger. "You always were selfish," he muttered. "Setting boundaries is not selfish," I replied calmly. "It's necessary for healthy relationships, something I had to learn the hard way." I unlocked my phone and pulled up a document I had prepared while in the house. "I won't leave you with nothing. Here's the contact information for 3 extended stay hotels in the area that offer weekly rates. I've paid for 2 weeks at any of these places, which should give you time to figure out your next steps." I sent the information to Lucas's phone, which buzzed in his pocket. I've also included contact information for the local Workforce Development Center. They offer job placement services and resume assistance. And there's information about rental assistance programs in LA County. Jessica looked up, confusion evident in her tear-stained face. "Why would you help us at all after everything we did?" "Because I choose to be better than the treatment I received," I said simply. "I won't bring you into my home and risk exposing my family to the same toxic dynamics I grew up with, but I can offer practical assistance that helps you move forward on your own path." Lucas seemed torn between gratitude and lingering resentment. "Your daughter," he said after a moment. "Would you at least let us meet her? She's our niece, after all." I shook my head. "Not now. Maybe someday if you demonstrate real change over time. But that relationship would need to be built on genuine connection, not obligation or guilt." "How are we supposed to prove we've changed if you won't give us a chance?" Lucas demanded. "By respecting the boundaries I'm setting right now," I replied. "Smack understanding that trust once broken takes more than a single conversation to rebuild. By building your lives back up independently and approaching me as equals, not as people who need to be rescued." I could see they were disappointed, perhaps even angry, but there was also a glimmer of understanding in their eyes. They knew deep down that they had no right to expect more from me. "The offer of the hotel and resources stands," I said. "The rest is up to you." Jessica nodded slowly. "It's more than we deserve." "Defends basically a compassion," I said, "but not everyone deserves unfettered access to our lives. That has to be earned through consistent respect and care." Lucas remained silent, his pride clearly wounded. Finally, he said, "We'll take the hotel offer, and I'm sorry, Maya. For everything. Not just because we need help now, but because I see now how wrong I was. It took losing everything to understand what really matters." I said, "For your sake more than mine. I forgave you years ago, not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace." With that, I closed the gate, locked it, and walked back to my home, where David and Sophia waited on the deck. David put his arm around me as we watched Lucas and Jessica get into their car and drive away. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said, and meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel completely at peace with my family situation. Not because it's fixed, but because I know my worth doesn't depend on their validation. That evening, after Sophia was in bed, I called Professor Chen to tell him what had happened. He listened thoughtfully as I recounted the encounter. "You did the right thing," he said when I had finished. "True healing doesn't mean letting people who hurt you back into your life unconditionally. It means making choices from a place of strength rather than fear or obligation." "I keep thinking about what I'd want Sophia to do if she were ever in my position," I told him. "And I'd want her to protect her peace, to understand that love should never require her to sacrifice her well-being or dignity." As the sun set over the Pacific, I sat alone on the beach below our house, watching the waves crash against the shore. The ocean had been my constant companion these past years, its vastness reminding me that my problems were just one small part of a much larger world. Its constancy had taught me that, like the tides, Life moves in cycles of challenge and peace. The greatest lesson I had learned through everything was this: family is not defined by blood, but by actions. It's built on mutual respect, consistent support, and unconditional acceptance. The people who truly deserve a place in our lives are those who value us for exactly who we are, not for what we can do for them or how we make them look to others. Setting boundaries is not about punishing those who hurt us. It's about creating space for relationships that nurture rather than deplete us. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to say no to dynamics that no longer serve us. My journey from the family disappointment to a woman standing firmly in her own power had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of loneliness, of wondering if I was making the right choices. But sitting there on the beach, with the home I had built behind me and the family I had chosen above me on the deck, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had created exactly the life I was meant to live. Confiscated as I watched the last light fade from the sky, I felt gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the challenges that had forced me to find my strength. Gratitude for the people who had seen my worth when my family couldn't. And yes, even gratitude for Lucas and Jessica, whose rejection had ultimately set me free to become the person I was always meant to be. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family members who hurt you? How did you find the strength to stand your ground when they needed something from you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your worth is not determined by those who failed to see it, but by your courage to honor yourself despite their blindness.